And so let me offer my thanks for everybody signing in. We appreciate you being here today. And I know that end of the semester is a busy time for faculty and staff members. And so for you to take a few minutes out of your day to come participate in this town hall, it means a lot. And I just let me add my thanks to everyone for making this semester a great one. I know the students have gotten rich experiences both in the classroom and across the campus. Unfortunately, the weather hasn't been the greatest. It looks like spring is here finally with 60-degree temperatures and blue skies. So let's enjoy it for the last couple of weeks of the semester and then roll into the summer. But again, my appreciation to everyone for all the hard work that you've put in. I wanted to, today's largely going to focus on the legislative session and things that we've seen coming out of it. And the session ended this weekend on Saturday. We're still waiting for some legislation to be signed off by the governor. And today we'll really just try to give you a sense of where we stand on certain pieces of legislation, what it means for the university, and then to answer your questions. So I'll spend a few minutes up front just giving an overview. Before I did that, I wanted to thank the campus for all of your hard work on the UND Leads strategic plan. And the great work that went on. Hundreds and hundreds of people contributed. We launched it in January, and we've been building the implementation team to actually execute that vision and to determine the ways that we're going to evaluate initiatives and to push those initiatives forward, to find resources to make initiatives happen, and to make certain that we execute that vision the right way, and with the spirit of cooperation across the campus that led to the construction of the strategic plan. So I wanted to take this moment also to say congratulations to Ryan Zier. Dr. Zier is coming into a new position that we've created, the Associate Vice President for Strategy and Implementation, and he'll oversee the campus's activities to achieve the goals and the objectives written into UND Leads. In addition, he'll head a committee known as the implementation team, and the implementation team, he'll co-chair that along with Angie Carpenter, who has been an extraordinary member of our campus for years and has contributed in so many ways to strategic planning, both the current version and the older version of the strategic plan. In addition, those two will be joined on the implementation team by our Chief Data Officer, Amanda Mosky, our new Director of Institutional Effectiveness and Accreditation, Shane Shelfeffer, who was his hiring was just announced. It will also involve the Provost's Director of Strategy Planning and Communications, Anna Clark, as well as Chief of Staff, Rob Carolyn. In addition, we'll have direct connections to shared governance with participation on that committee by the Staff Council President, the Student Government President, and then also the University Senate Chair and the Chair-elect. And so in that way, we unify things nicely. And then finally, rounding out the crew will be representatives both from the budget and finance, so the resource allocation team here on campus, and then also marketing and communication. So big, exciting opportunity for us to put that team together to usher initiatives through under UND Leads. So just wanted to make sure I acknowledged all those folks. And then in addition, let me get to the legislative piece as well. And then I'll turn it over to Melanie Linder, who is going to control the flow of the questions and answers. Just a couple of highlights. The first is the appropriations bill. This is House Bill 1003. This is where money is allocated to higher ed and to the individual campuses. And it's with the governor right now. He hasn't signed it yet, and we're eager to get his signature. But of note are the proposed salary pool increases. So the salary pool for the next 2 years will be 6% and 4%. And it represents a recognition by the legislature of the impact of things like inflation and the need to remain competitive with the market for salaries, both for faculty and staff. We sustained a continuation of the Challenge Grant program, which is a way for state money to be matched with donor money for student scholarships and endowed faculty positions. We'll get about $5 million at UND for those programs. We received $9 million to support our work on space-related research and education, as well as national security. There was another $2.5 million that came to the university for our high performance computing 2.5% for additional research and economic diversification activities. And it's just financially, I think the legislature put us in a very good position. There's some capital projects that were funded as well, including additional funding for Merrifield, but also a substantial piece of funding to support the development of a new STEM complex, and in fact, the engineering piece of that new STEM complex. So a lot of good things happening within the appropriations bill, but undoubtedly you'll have more questions about it. In addition, one element of 1003 that I think requires specific mention is it's called Section 19. It was added following the failure of a bill called 1446, which was going to put limitations on tenure. But the addition in this Section 19 of the appropriations bill, let me read it to you. It says, the president of an institution under the control of the State Board of Higher Education may adopt policies, procedures, and directives for the institution with input, but no authoritative control from faculty and others through shared governance. And on the surface, this seems to give carte blanche to presidents. What strikes me about that is the word that says with input from faculty and others through shared governance, which compels that input, which I think it actually reinforces good practice of shared governance. The frightening piece to some might be the statement of, but no authoritative control from those same entities. And we're going to work through what that means on our campus, but I don't see any change to our UND Constitution or any of our processes of shared governance as a consequence of that section. I know the provost, the leadership team, and I all feel a strong connection to the ideals represented by shared governance. And so we'll make sure that we keep those processes and procedures in place. And again, I think the UND Constitution as written is strong, and it meets the guidance that's in that new section, Section 19. Of interest also will be House Bill 1040, which addresses the public employees pension plan, which is phasing out the defined benefit plan and putting into place the defined contribution plan. So going from a pension plan to a 401k plan, a 401k-like plan for new employees. So more information will follow on how that transition will happen. But those who are currently under the pension will have the option of sustaining their pension as currently defined in your benefits. In addition, I'm just thumbing through some others. I mentioned 1446, the tenure bill, which failed. But just know that the State Board of Higher Education has been tasked to look at tenure and post-tenure review. So the chair of the board, Casey Ryan, is actually going to chair that subcommittee of the State Board to make sure that we're executing good processes and procedures for tenure and post-tenure review. And as I talk, make sure that you populate the Q&A. So use the Q&A function to begin teeing up your questions. The good news for the EERC, their designation as the State Energy Research Center was sustained. In addition, there was a $7.5 million biennial allocation to conduct the work of the State Energy Research Center. And so the sunset clause, which would cause that entity to go away after a certain amount of time, has been removed. So that's a good news story as well. There's one that's gotten a lot of attention, is one called Specified Concepts in Higher Education. This is Bill 2247, which had a list of 16 or 17 topics that the legislature said we can't compel people to follow. I mean, so, but there's a lot of nuance to this bill, and we need to make sure that we understand fully the impact on our campus. But there was an important provision that we had added to that bill, which was that academic freedom and freedom of speech would not be impacted by the provisions of this bill. In other words, what you do in your classrooms and the thoughtful discussions you have about various theories and facts and things related to what might currently be considered controversial topics is not impacted by this bill. What is impacted is penalties that might go to students or employees or faculty members who have views that might be different from our own or different from your own. And so there are some protections for individual rights within that as well. So I know undoubtedly there'll be questions about 2447 as we go forward. In addition, there are many other bills that came forward with respect to gender identity and participation on sports teams, on restrooms and shower facilities within our living units, and just general use of pronouns. And so what I need to do is just reinforce the notion and the important idea that the University of North Dakota and our policies and the way that we need to interact must be rooted in principles of dignity and respect, dignity for the human being, and making sure that everybody has fair access to education, that there's no discrimination or harassment because of one's background, and in particular in the LGBTQ community, making sure that people from that community are treated with respect and dignity. And again, this is a principle that applies to all students on our campus, and we need to make sure that nobody is singled out for who they are, and to make sure that education is accessible and the environment on campus is accepting of all members of our campus. That's a principle of how we at the University of North Dakota need to operate. So we can go into more detail as the questions come forward. But legal counsel is taking a look at each of these items, and things like, do our current living facilities comply with the law? The answer is absolutely. The way that UND's restrooms and shower facilities within the residence halls fully complies with what's being stated within those laws. So let me stop there and turn it over. There's one other too. There was some discussion early on in the session about gun carry, so concealed carry in a variety of places. There was one bill that talked about concealed carry on college campuses, and then several other bills that talked about concealed carry in other places, like the state capitol and other public spaces. And so those were all rejected in favor of a study that will go on during the interim period over the next 2 years about what should concealed carry look like across all of these different domains. So more to follow there as we move into the next session. So I have all members of the team are here who have detailed expertise about the questions that you might have. So we'll have Melanie actually control the flow now. And Melanie, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your leadership and all the work that you've done throughout the session. And a great opportunity also to thank all the people from the campus, whether it's our elected leadership from the different senates or others on campus who use their voice to talk about their views on the various legislation. This is what it means by governance for the people and by the people, is your voice matters. Melanie, over to you.
All right. Thank you, President Armacost, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. And thank to all of our panelists for taking the time to answer all of our questions. And I appreciate questions are already starting to roll in. There are a few that are around the 6 and 4 merit increase. So I'm going to group some of those together, and I'm going to turn them over to VP Stewart. The question is, VP Stewart, a couple of questions of one, is it a merit-based or is it across the board 6% for everyone in the year one? Will it be effective July 1, 2023? And then finally, how is it funded? Is it fully state funded, or are institutions expected to pay for part or all of the merit increases?
Thank you, Melanie. I will try to remember all of them, but you might have to remind me if I start talking and I don't answer everything.
Will do.
It is a pool, so it is not an across the board salary increase. So the amounts may differ from employee to employee. But yes, indeed, there is a 6% pool that it'll be available for all eligible employees. And eligible employees is defined as anyone who has an employee evaluation on file and has met expectations in all areas. So as long as those two criteria are met, the employee is eligible for that pool, but no, it's not an across the board increase. Amounts may vary from employee to employee. Oh, do you want to follow up on that part?
No, the third part of that is are the increases going to be funded through the state, or are the institutions expected to fund all or part of the increases?
Okay, so what we call appropriated dollars, which is a culmination of both state funding and tuition dollars. The state generously funded the entire portion of the appropriated increase so that we could minimize tuition increases. And so that portion was all funded by the state. However, we have a lot of positions that are funded by resources other than state and tuition dollars. This would include all grants and contracts funded positions. This would include any kind of position that's funded by a fee, whether it be a student fee or flight fees or any housing, room and board fees, anything like that. Those positions, the institutions will have to use the revenues generated from those areas to cover the salary increases in those areas. So the state did not fund those increases, but they did fund the tuition share and the state share of the appropriated salary increases.
Thanks, Carla.
Effective date.
Just a quick update as well. To add to what Vice President Stewart just said, in past sessions, the legislature only funded a portion of that appropriated piece, namely the portion that comes out of general funds. The piece that is covered by tuition has historically been the responsibility of the university to pay for. But as Carla said, this year they were generous. Not only did they issue a 6% and 4% pool increase, but they also covered that extra tuition portion so that we wouldn't have to increase tuition for the students.
All right. Thank you, President Armacost, VP Stewart. President Armacost, I'm going to throw this next question to you. It came in that saying, you may interpret the president's powers as part of shared governance, but what happens if we ever get a president who doesn't interpret things the same way, referencing House Bill 1003?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right, you currently have leaders who adopt the principles of shared governance, I think, very strongly. There are, we look at the UND Constitution, which is kind of the governing body of our shared government, the governing document of our shared governance processes. And in there, it grants decisions to the legislative body, namely the Senate and the Council, to make decisions on certain matters, and it outlines each of those. But there's always this presidential veto that exists, right? And so the question is whether a particular president wants to accept the advice or not. In other words, execute a veto or not. And that exists within our current governance structure. And I think that's common for most, if not all, institutions of higher education. I can't comment about all. I guess that's too much of a stretch, but many systems follow the same type of constitutional authorities. So you point out something that's true. On some campuses and in some time periods, presidents have powers to do things on their own. So it's a true statement.
Thank you, President Armacost. I'm going to go back to Vice President Stewart. There's a question about confirmation of a tuition freeze. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that for the group.
Sorry, I'm being mouse challenged today. There is a tuition freeze, but I would hesitate to call it a tuition freeze because really what it is it's a tuition increase limit. So our base tuition, which is programs that do not have a differential rate, and our general tuition rate for undergraduate is frozen at last year's rate. However, the legislature has given the institutions the flexibility for programs that have differential tuition to, if they determine applicable, increase those up to 1% each year of the biennium. So we are reviewing that information with the provost and the deans right now to determine if there are programs that we are going to do a 1% increase or not. So there is still flexibility for an increase only on, again, differential tuition programs. And again, those are also ultimately at the discretion of President Armacost and Provost Link. So we'll be reviewing those in the next week. Those will be reviewed and approved by the State Board of Higher Ed. On May 17th, it'll go to the Budget and Finance arm of the board, and then whatever is finally agreed to will go through on the May 23rd board meeting. So nothing will be final until May 23rd, but we are reviewing those as we speak.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to send this next question over to Provost Link. It's in regard to, it says, will Casey Ryan's tenure committee from the State Board of Higher Ed invite input from our campus? UND's post-tenure review process is pretty well developed. Provost Link?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I can't address what Casey Ryan may or may not ask from our institution. I've not received the details for what that the structure of that study might look like. But of course, as an institution, I hope that we will be given a voice at the table. And knowing Casey Ryan a little bit, I suspect he'll be very interested in soliciting our opinions as the State Board of Higher Education works through their discussion. But I don't have any specifics at this time about what role we may or may not get to play on that particular committee. I would defer to President Armacost if he's heard anything more than that, but I've not heard any specific details.
Great. So thanks, Provost Link. No details yet. There's no specific plan that's been constructed. I can guarantee that faculty input from UND will be solicited and brought forward, if not directly to Chair Ryan, then through me. In addition, the CCF and the state board rep, the faculty rep, will also bring faculty input forward, undoubtedly as part of this process.
Thank you both. This next question I will send to Dr. Bailey. Dr. Bailey, does UND foresee Senate Bill 2247 having any impact on our DEI initiatives on campus, such as diversity training due to its prohibition on mandatory non-credit training surrounding specified topics?
Thank you so much for the question. I'm going to say, as most of you all who do know me, I will say this is kind of a and both. And so I think it is, yes, it will have some impact on some of the DEI training, and no, as it relates to training related to non-discrimination requirements by the federal or at the state level. Also, it does not prohibit or stop us from having to file non-discriminatory laws. So we do know those things are in place. We also know with this bill, if I move a little bit away from training, that in the classroom, we know that academic freedom still exists. And so there is no prohibit in terms of limiting academic freedom. And there's no limit in terms of free speech. So I do think it will have some impact, and we're continuing to work with the state's attorney, forgive me for not getting this right, and Melanie, you may have better, but I think it's our state's attorneys general. I think that's at the state level. And then with us here at the university, our general counsel, to make sure that we're in compliance and we're having some sense of what we need to do. So it is, again, it's an and both, but we will continue to make sure that we are really being thoughtful and we continue to do the work as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion that we need to do here at UND.
Thank you. All right, the next question is regard to housing. So I'm going to send this over to our Director of Housing, Troy. Troy, will students in university housing be able to select to live with others of the opposite gender in apartment style living with a shared bathroom?
Thanks, Melanie. My name is Troy Noller, Director of Housing and Residence Life. The legislation that was passed specifically has a section regarding dormitory or residence halls. And in that legislation on line 3, or if you have it in front of you, it does talk about that this legislation only affects dormitories or dormitory floors where there is a designation of male or female gender. So our apartment housing policies won't be impacted by this. So as long as everybody in the apartment unit agrees to live with one another, then yes, they would still be able to be co-gender or mixed gender in those units.
Thanks, Troy. All right, this next question I'm going to send back to President Armacost. President Armacost, the chilling social bills coming through the legislature, whether they pass or not, do not go unnoticed outside of the state and certainly would affect whether people would want to come here as a newly recruited faculty or student. What can or will the university do to combat these impressions locally?
Right. One of the first things we need to do is to put our interpretation of the impact of these bills in a format that is available to all faculty and staff members, but also members of the community and potentially people who are looking to come to UND as faculty or staff members, as employees. So as we close out the session, the team is working hard to put that information together, just so we know what's fact and what's fiction. A great example was the Chronicle the other day, noting that there are 33 states with these divisive concepts legislation, and that North Dakota was the first one to approve. So that makes us look like we're taking a pretty bold step, which this is a restrictive step. But again, academic freedom is protected. We need to make sure that the protection of academic freedom and free speech is made known to the public, and that in fact we weren't the first. Tennessee passed a very similar bill last year. So we need to take some of the sensational headlines and work hard to tamp those down and give people a sense of really what's happening within each of these bills. But I think the writers, whoever wrote the question, is right. The accumulation of a number of bills certainly could impact those seeking to either come to campus or stay on campus, just because of the way it appears. And so we need to be mindful of that, but still offer a campus that offers each member, student, faculty, staff members, that sense of dignity and respect that they so deserve.
Thank you. The next question I'm going to send to Peggy Varberg. Peggy, if someone is on probation until March, or as an example, do they qualify for merit for the merit raise? And so I guess in general, how long does someone have to be in their position to qualify for the merit that would go in effect July 1?
We don't actually have an answer to that. I'll be quite honest. It's really up to this point has been up to the leadership in that area as to whether they have a cutoff or not. The salary administration policy simply says that as long as they have a current evaluation on record, they may be eligible. So again, it's something that I think we need to make a campus decision on, and that's part of discussions that we're having with the president and his executive council.
Thanks, Peggy. And don't jump off yet. The next one's coming your way as well. The question again, is it going to be solely merit-based, or is there an amount that everyone will get for sure?
So that's a very good question. And I would like to be able to definitively say yay or nay, one way or the other. But first thing to remember is this is not approved through the governor yet. And then we will also get some direction likely from OMB and the State Board of Higher Ed. From there, then again, we go back to the president and executive council and must follow, what direction they give us.
Great. And don't jump off. The next one's for you too, Peggy. So if the pool is 6 and 4 of all salaries, the question is, why can my administrator say that a 4% and 2% is the max we will be able to receive?
I'm not really sure how that can be said at this point. However, when we have pools of money, it is up to leadership to decide how to disperse that. And so I know I'll just answer this one too. I know there was a question in the chat when we went to meets, does not meets, and there's no above exceptional or 4 and 5. How do you make those decisions? Basically, and again, leadership needs to sit down and they review the evaluations, and they look for things that would, projects and examples of work that would set people apart who may get a higher increase, based on the work that was done. And so that's, always really, that's how a lot of the areas have done it. They've really looked for the words that, instead of the 1 through 5 or the meets or does not meets, they're really looking for the words that set people apart, either in an excellent way or in a developmental way.
Thanks, Peggy.
Sure.
I'm going to send the next question over to Vice President Stewart. The question is, will there be an increase to the overall cost of our health insurance? I understand that does not come out of our pocket, but does it get charged to our grant budgets? So I guess this individual's on a grant, so that's why they're asking.
Thank you for the question. The answer is it's health insurance increases are exactly the same as salary increases, so they follow the funding. So the legislature, there is a 15% health insurance increase. The state funded that share for appropriated positions. So again, funded the tuition share and the general fund share. But if you are on a grant, or if your fund, or if your department or area has people funded on local dollars, auxiliary dollars, revenue generating dollars, the impact will have to be paid for out of those funds, just like the salary increase. And the amount is a 15% increase.
Thanks, Carla. All right, the
Sure.
next question, I'm going to send it back over to you, and it's regarding House Bill 1040, the NDPers plan. And the question is, will the employer contribution rates increase by 1% effective January 2024? And will this increase be the responsibility of the departments?
Thank you for the question. And again, I never like to say, I don't know yet, but how I will answer it is yes, effective January 1, there will be an additional 1% increase to the employer share. What I can't definitively tell you is it is unclear based on the language, and we are waiting to get clarification from the system office if additional funding was put into the budget to cover that additional 1%. So the answer to the first part of the question is a definitive yes. The answer to the second part of the question is I don't fully know the answer yet, because we have not gotten full answers on whether or not that there was any funding provided in our bills to cover that. So as soon as I know that, I will make sure that we share that information with the campus community.
Thank you. The next question is going to go back to Peggy. Peggy, with the change this year to meets or does not meet for annual evaluations, how will it be determined what percentage employees receive for a merit increase?
Same as what I've just discussed. So first off, we need to have some discussions with EC further to decide how that's going to look in terms of the 6%. We know that the salary guidelines have said it can't be the same. Sorry, I'm looking at it. So because I know there was a question in the chat about that as well. But not inherently supposed to be the same percentages for all employees, but and we're hoping to maybe have some further guidelines that go out that speak to this, that we're working with the budget department on. So I can't fully answer that until I know some other answers about the 6% in general.
Thanks. And Peggy, the question is also, let's see here, those positions where their position descriptions were revised and they received an increase due to the revision, will they get the 6 and 4 as well?
They would be eligible for an increase as well. Yeah, as long as they have an evaluation and the performance meets, then they would be eligible for an increase as well.
Excellent, thank you. Peggy, can you also answer this next question of, can you provide more details on the new 401k program benefit, and if a current employee can stay on the pension as it stands and receive full benefits of that program?
Yep, we don't know the answers to that. I'm sorry, that seems to be the rule of my day today. There's still just a lot left out on the table. And as far as what that looks like, we don't know yet. And so there'll be a lot of work done in the next few months with NDPers, in addition to OMB and probably the State Board of Higher Ed with regard to what the new program looks like. We know that the cutoff date will be January 1st of 2024. That's what it looks like. And so those that are in the current plan will be grandfathered and they'll stay there. And then anybody hired after January 1st, 2024 would go into the new plan. What we don't know is if people will be allowed to move plans. Currently, there's not a lot of, they don't allow that a lot. So with the two plans that we have, the NDPers pension for non-exempt employees, and then the TIAA, which is for exempt employees. If you move to an exempt position, you are allowed to make a choice. But a lot of people have stayed. They've stayed right in the NDPers pension program. But we don't know. Those are all questions. We got some information, yesterday at the Human Resource Council, but those were all questions that we also had. So we're hoping to find out more of that and have good conversations with NDPers minimally next month.
Great. And
Can I add to that, Melanie?
Oh, yes, please, Carla.
I just want to make sure everyone knows too, it's not that UND doesn't know. Literally, the state and the system doesn't know how it's all going to work yet. So I just wanted to clarify that this was the very last bill that passed. And so I don't even actually know if it's been signed by the governor yet. So I just want to clarify for everybody, it's not that UND doesn't know what we're doing yet. The state and NDPers has not, it's so new, and I don't think they were fully prepared for it passing. And so we're waiting on them to get us the information we need. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that. And this next question may fall in the same lines, but I'll send it to either you or to Peggy. But what will happen to the NDPer pensions for those who are currently on the original pension plan? They're just wondering, do they need to worry that their retirement is going to change?
I can take that. Absolutely not. The law change is to stop new entrants from entering the plan. So anyone who is in the existing plan, their benefits will not change. What they have is what they will get, and they will continue to contribute to that plan. The bill was specifically targeted at stopping new applicants from, or new employees from entering the plan. So if you're in the plan and you continue to be in the plan through January of 2024, your benefits should not change at all.
Thank you. I'm going to send this next question over to President Armacost. The question is back to Senate Bill 2247 around specified concepts. How might that impact the staff members? Are there any foreseeable changes that staff should be aware of?
Well, before I answer that, let me go back to the previous question too, just about, there's a lot of questions about specific benefits, like on the pension versus the contribution plan. And as soon as we get more information, we'll have very clear guidance and like a one-pager that describes kind of the timing of the changes and so forth, just to make it easier to comprehend. I know we're throwing a lot of numbers and dates around, so just know that will be forthcoming. To the issue of 2247, it's still going through a good review by the NDUS, the system-wide legal office, to understand what the bounds are. There are certain provisions in that bill that for staff members, for any employee, in fact, that outlines what might impact you. They do say that you as an employee can't be penalized, discriminated against, or receive adverse treatment for your ideological or political viewpoints. That actually restates something that exists already, both within policy and in law. But there's a number of provisions within 2247 that talk about how we can engage on these difficult discussions, right? We know that when it comes to race and gender issues, there's a polarization across our nation right now. And so what this does is it lays down some what we can and cannot do, how we can evaluate employees and so forth. So So there's a number of rights to employees that are included in here. Our goal, of course, is to make UND that place where we can have these tough discussions without fear of reprisal in either direction, and to make sure that people have not only freedom of speech, but freedom of conscience as well. So, and Donna Smith, you might have some additional points to raise on this one as well. Sorry to call you out of the blue, but over to you for your thoughts.
That's okay. Thank you. Actually, I was thinking you said it perfectly. We will spend some time over the next few months looking at the various trainings that we have on campus, both those that are required and those that are optional, to make sure that we are complying with the law in the way that we talk about these issues. And our focus doesn't change in the fact that what we want for our campus is a place where students and employees, as President said earlier, where everyone is respected for who they are. And so that will be our focus going forward.
Thanks, Donna. Dr. Bailey, do you have anything you also would like to add on this topic?
Thank you. Just trying to get to my camera here. No, I think that both the president and what Donna Smith said really speak to that. I think we're always trying to make sure we have a welcoming and inclusive space in campus, while also trying to make sure that we're in compliance with this. And as the president said, there are things that we're aware of in the bill, particularly as it relates to, a person's perspective, their kind of political, ideological perspective, and that those things aren't being discriminated against. And so I think the two of them have said it, and I think that we'll continue to make sure we have a good understanding as we move forward.
Thank you. I'm going to send the next question to Peggy again. Peggy, there are several questions coming in regarding the salary review that's going to be underway, and how might that impact things. So I'll turn that over to you.
So we are about to sign, we've just finished negotiations and are about to sign a contract with Huron Consulting, who will come in and do a full bore review of our pay, right? Equity, both in a Title VII, gender, race perspective, in addition to where people are and do we have them matched in the right spaces, those kinds of things. We've never done this at UND wholeheartedly like this. And so I'm excited. I'm excited for the process. Process will take, once we're starting, about 17 weeks. And then we will work with the consulting firm to see where we have disparities, what those disparities are, and then put a plan together, right? To identify any gaps, why we have those gaps, whether it's because of a Title VII, gender, race, those kinds of things, ethnicity, any of those kinds of things, or if it's because pay is in the wrong, the market is wrong, the person is in the wrong job code, or they just simply are in the wrong space. They need to be in a different space. So we are working with that actively, and we're hoping to get that started and off the ground here in the next couple or 3 weeks, but we're working with procurement on the finalizing of what that contract looks like.
Thank you, Peggy. President Armacost, I'm going to send this next question over to you. It's around the university. There are a variety of 360-like evaluations used for annual reviews, but they are not consistent across campus. After discussing senior level administrator 360 evaluations for more than a decade, are there plans to implement this?
There are a number of places where those arise. Certainly the deans as part, and Provost Link, you be on standby to confirm what I'm saying. But deans, when they're up for their renewals, their appointment renewals, we instituted a process a few years back to do a 360 on them. I know that as part of their annual reviews, the provost has certainly used feedback from subordinates within the colleges and schools, and so I think those are important parts. I will go through a 360. You'll have a chance to meet with the state board members this fall. I think they're doing it in September. So I certainly would appreciate your feedback on the leadership that I hope I'm providing the campus. And Eric, over to you for additional thoughts.
Yeah, I can certainly confirm that we conduct a 360 review every third year for all standing deans. That is in addition, of course, to the annual evaluation that all deans undergo, like every other employee on campus. We have also taken steps in the past year, at least since I've arrived, to expand more broadly the upward feedback that we solicit from the campus community on administrators within the office of the provost. So deans and other administrators, we are sending out Qualtrics surveys for upward feedback to more people and gathering more information and giving more people an opportunity to let us know how they think we are serving the needs of campus. So thank you, President Armacost, for tossing it over to me, and back to you, Melanie.
All right, thank you both. Peggy, another question for you. With staff shortages, is UND going to start accepting experience for open positions instead of just education to be qualified for position?
We actually do already. So if you look at the PD, there are some of them position descriptions that will say bachelor's or master's or associates or experience, right? And the experience has to be directly related to the position. So we have done that. We have in job banding, we have to support why we would do that. And so if we, especially in a 3,000 band, if it requires a bachelor's degree, then why would we allow experience to be accepted? And so we just document that, like we've had trouble recruiting, we've had, whatever the case is for specific areas, but we have done that. And we work with leadership, with the hiring managers, and we walk through that. The HR managers walk through the PDs with them and talk about those perspectives and allow traditionally we'll let the hiring manager make that decision as to whether they will or not. I will say, just to comment sort of on this road, we have seen a significant uptick in applications over the last month. So we're getting many more applications than we did before. And that's really been a positive note. We had one position that opened on this past Monday, and the next day they had 45 candidates in the queue. And so don't know quality, don't know if they're all, eligible for the position or qualified, but we've been really happy. The change in the national market has gone different in that employers aren't hiring as much as they were before. And so it's becoming a little more competitive again, which is really beneficial for us.
All right, thanks, Peggy. One more question going back to the equity study. There's the question of what is the cost for the Huron contract?
We are still, that's the piece we're still negotiating, but it looks somewhere between 360 and 380,000. But it's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that they'll do for us, and they'll really help us create some strategies to help us solve any of the gaps that we have. So there's a tremendous amount of work that they do for us.
Thanks, Peggy. President Armacost, I'm going to throw this next one back to you. It says a while back, there were discussions about UND's policy around snow and storm days. And with all of the storms we had this past semester, will anything be changing in the future? And I will say, yes, it's been a doozy of a winter this year.
What a winter we had, and thanks for everybody for bearing with it. Our principal focus this year on decision making was health and safety of faculty, staff, and students. We do realize the inconvenience this presented to those faculty members trying to press through material, and others who had events scheduled on the campus who were disrupted. So our apologies for that. So last year, we said, let's look at our our ability to go remote teaching and remote activity during snow days. And a committee, and Peggy Barberg can probably shed a little more info, but a great committee from across the campus met, and largely they reinforced the policies that were currently in place. This winter, of course, I think with the number of disruptions, it's causing us to want to go back and reignite the work of that committee, and to examine what options do we have. There's interesting pay features that when you close, who gets paid what. And so anytime you're talking pay, we want to make sure that any changes we make to policy are fair to the people on the campus. So that's one of the dominant factors. Peggy Barberg, any additional thoughts here? But the bottom line is it's something that we're definitely looking at. Hopefully there's no snow days over the summer, and it will give us an answer. So, thanks for everybody bearing with us. Peggy.
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, it was brutal for everyone in terms of all the days. This is a challenging topic. There's so many moving parts to it. And for 7 or 8 months, we did have a collaborative group from across the university that discussed it, and we discussed it with other partners in the NDUS system. And as the president knows, or most of us know, when we talk about making decisions about open and close, we do, Rodney's great about bringing other community partners like the city and the county and the school district and National Weather Service to the table with us when we have the meetings about what should we do. But it's evident that we need to think differently, maybe, and just really walk it back again and talk about it. And pay is an issue. You know, if we have a non-exempt employee who is working on a closure day, they get paid for the hours that they worked, and they get paid for the closure day. And that's the right thing to do, you know, at the moment. So these are all things that we need to know. What do we do with remote employees? If they're remote that day, should they continue to work? Should they, if they're in Grand Forks where this is closed, do they have to work, you know, if they're not essential? And what does an essential employee really look like? So, you know, in our ever-changing landscape of what our workforce looks like, where we are and how we do our work, we need to just back up again and put some people at the table and have conversations again.
Thank you, Peggy. And we're heading towards the last few minutes of our time together. So I'm going to send it over to President Armacost. I know we still have several questions regarding the merit increase. I know we've addressed, there's still some questions that we're waiting confirmation on, but President Armacost, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say to close regarding merit and then close us out for the day.
Right. Yeah. So keep in mind, the legislature was extraordinarily generous, more generous than they've been in the recent past in terms of making more money available for pay increases, and also to cover a greater portion of what they're offering. So that's great news. Again, we're still working out the details. There was a question about whether the 6% and 4% should apply to individuals or to a pool. And it's very clear in the legislation that it applies to a pool, and that's the all the NDUS, the system-wide guidance is the same, and both Peggy and Carla are working very closely with the finance people and the HR people at the system level to make sure we're in complete compliance with what's allowed. So I thought, so I just got an email from Kurt Hansen over in Special Collections at the library. He says, was that a bobblehead on your desk? So I thought I would end on a happy note. This is my Tom Petros bobblehead that I picked up a couple weeks ago. It's remaining in the box, kind of like a Toy Story character that we're all familiar with. But Tom, it's good to see you every day when I walk in, and hopefully you're online today as well. Let me end by saying thank you to everyone. This has been a busy semester. It's been a cold and snowy semester. I appreciate the support, the motivation, the excitement that you bring to the campus and to each and every one of your students and your colleagues as well. I think one of the most important things we can do is remain tight as a community. This forum hopefully was useful. We'll get, as I mentioned before, we'll get information to you about many of these details in writing so that you know the bounds of what we're talking about. And then in addition, if there's enough interest as we move through the weeks of the summer, if we want to get together again, kind of off cycle over the summer to explain more in depth, we can certainly put more town halls together. But let me thank all of my colleagues for being here, your expert answers to the questions that were asked, and to everybody, have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon.